Well, hello, church. I promised you some surprises as we go through this series on the orchard of God's grace, looking at the fruits of the Spirit. And one of the surprises is a dear friend of mine, Devin, Pickard, who has actually preached for us here a couple of times. I believe you were either the first or the second substitute preacher we ever brought here.
I think it had record views if you go look back and look.
It probably did.
Yeah,
It probably did.
Probably the most.
And Devin and I, you can tell, are quite related because we sound exactly the same. He is from the next county over and is in Centerville. And we put out all of this to our friends and said, all right, what subject would you like to take? And Devin immediately came back and said he'd like to do self-control. Now that's odd because that's normally about the last one to be picked up. So I'm going to start with that one. Why did you pick that one?
Well, nobody had picked it, for one, but I guess I was near the top of the list to be able
Yes.
to choose. And one would think that, love and kindness and all those would be at the top of the list, and they are. But what has happened for myself and my family over the last 10 years or so? So we planted Hope Church in 2015. And immediately we began to see that God was working through that family of folks in a little bit of a different way than what I was used to with my theological and church upbringing up to that point. We began seeing a lot of folks who, frankly, had some struggles in life. And one of those struggles was addiction. We had experienced that in our own family with my oldest daughter. We've been very open about that. She shared her story many times. After she graduated high school, she had a season, about a year or so, of drug addiction, specifically heroin, and it was a tough deal, man. We had to do a lot of tough love stuff. She left home. Every night you're wondering, are we going to get the call that she's been found in a ditch dead? And so praise the Lord that we've come through that. She's healthy, married, I have two grandchildren through her, and everything's good. But over the course of time, we just continue to see that, especially in our community there in Centerville, Hickman County, the drug situation, the alcohol situation, it's very significant. And there's a lot of good churches there in the community, no question about that. We've been a part of many of them. They do a lot of good work. But it seems that with regards to recovery and restoration, maybe there wasn't as much church outreach. And so we found ourselves doing that. And so we now have 3 recovery programs that meet weekly. We have an in-house program that was actually started by a lady who goes to church there, and she's a dog on a bone with that thing, man. I mean, she had a son who really struggled with addiction. She's created all sorts of different things within that program. And so that's called Hope in Recovery. We also began a year ago. We actually celebrated a year anniversary last night with what's called Recovery Church. That is a nationwide program that churches are a part of. We have added that to our list of outreaches. And so we have Hope in Recovery, we have Recovery Church, and just recently we've started a program on Thursday nights that really sort of along the lines of Celebrate Recovery. Mm-hmm. And it's for men right now, but they're hoping to find a female lead in that as well. So it's become our thing. And so with regards to self-control, let me land the plane. That's what we all struggle with as individuals, I think. I know that I do. The hardest person for Devin to tell no to is Devin. And so it's just become the glaring theme throughout Hope Church, the Hope Church ministry. We are very similar to our safe harbor in that we just want to introduce folks to Jesus and love on those people, help them to come into a deeper relationship with Him. But very close to that is helping folks to begin to learn to be able to say no to themselves with regards to drugs, no to themselves with regards to alcohol. And it's just become a real passion of ours, and we're really growing. And the demographic of the people that make up our church family, a lot of those folks are just there to try to get healthy. Maybe not a lot of church in their history, so they'll step into a worship service not really knowing what to do. But they know that healing can be found there. And we've baptized a lot of folks, and a lot of people they're getting healthy, and we're so thankful for that.
Well, one of the things that I noticed about Hope Church when I've visited there a few times now
Yeah.
is, and I hope I'm saying this correctly, so feel free to correct me. I saw a lot of the unchurched,
Yeah.
but I also saw a lot of folk that would be rejected by other churches that felt at home there.
Yes.
Some of them would come up to me after and say, "This is how I found Hope Church." And there would be divorce, there would be addiction, there would be church abuse of some sort.
Yeah.
So they'd been harmed, or they had harmed themselves, or they were lost, and they could find a non-judgmental place to get better, as you said, but also to get better and find Jesus. Even if I understand correctly, some of them weren't looking for Jesus, but they got Jesus because they came there to get better.
I think a lot of times that's exactly how the scenario works, and you just gave a perfect Cliff Notes version of Hope Church. I'm going to cut that out and use that if I may. But it's so true. So when you walk into our foyer, you might say, if you walk into our foyer, in big letters on the wall it just says, "You belong here." You belong here. And so we have folks who show up who, frankly, they may not even be sure there's a creator, a God. And I will say this, we reiterate this regularly, in that if that's where you are, but you really like these people, and you love that we have a 10-minute meet and greet where we just get up before I get up and between music, and we use the restroom, but there's a lot of hugging and how you doing and good to see you and my name is. And a lot of those folks are there for just some of that. I think the old adage is true that before they care anything about what you know, they want to know that you care. Mm-hmm. And I think that most of the time people, when they show up at Hope Church, oftentimes anyway, are there for other reasons other than Jesus. But we're back here in the back. Hey, look at this hand. But over here, we're really hoping that they come into relationship with Him through the recovery work, through our trying to have the discipline of learning to say no. And that has resulted in many, many baptisms. We'll have 4 or 5 at a time. It's amazing the amount of baptisms that Hope Church has had the honor of being a part of. We have a river right there in our community, 5 minutes from the church, the Duck River. And so, you know, I really like the idea of living water. I mean, I was baptized in a baptistry. But I had an opportunity to go to Israel a couple of years ago, and I was also baptized in the Jordan River. And there was something about being in this living water, this moving water, where you have things that are living and breathing and moving. And so we don't have a baptistry. We could get a horse trough, I guess, but we love going to the river, and we say that, you know, we buried in the waters of baptism, and those sins just wash on down to the Tennessee River. Mm-hmm. And so all these folks who are coming are just they're just looking for love. They're looking for acceptance. And folks, you know, I don't scream at them and pound my Bible about their lives. Yeah. And so anyway, yeah, it's good.
We used to have, when I was in Rochester, Michigan, we used to have 3 services on a Sunday morning, just one right after the other. On the third one, we would gather around tables for the Lord's Supper. We didn't pass it. And we had a lady that attended the third service that surprised me she chose that one, because she was more conservative, and the third one was what we called mosaic, because a little bit of everybody showed up. Church for people that didn't like church. Yeah. And one time I just pulled her aside, and I said, "Can I just ask why you choose this one?" And her answer has haunted me ever since. She said, "This is the only time all week I know I'll be hugged."
Oh, my.
So she could discount her discomfort with some of the things going on during the worship.
Yes.
Because when we took the Lord's Supper at the table, somebody would hug her. And that was enough.
That's beautiful.
Well, we need love. Yeah. We need cessation of our pain. But a lot of this can lead to addiction, whether it's sex addiction or where we're trying to ameliorate our pain, cut it back down by alcohol or drugs. Sometimes we're trying to run from life rather than living life because our life is that very painful. One of the things I think churches get wrong here, if I may be so bold, is that we tend to have concentrated on other control instead of self-control. We preach to people about their sins. We judge people on their sins. We look at the community and tell them where they are falling short. instead of self-control, which is much more difficult than other control. The old expression, I don't know who said it first, but it's got to be a long time ago, do as I say, not as I do. Sadly, the practicing what you preach has not been a hallmark of Christians. So, God is love, we love you, and yet it comes across as, we love you, but you're inadequate, and you must come up to a standard, rather than not judging others and controlling ourselves. Am I being honest and clear there?
Absolutely, I think so. Yes.
Okay.
Very accurate.
It's very hard because people think it's their job to point out the faults of others.
They do.
When the scripture, when Jesus said, you got a log in your own eye, I have asked people actually who just constantly pour out on social media the judgment against others. I've said, are you now free of sin that you can do this? How quickly they explain away verses. No, we're called to fix ourselves. And I've said this to our church several times. There's no surprise to anybody. I'm 68 years old and I'm quite disappointed at where I am spiritually. I really thought I'd be better. Self-control is a lifelong job. And if you're working on it, you don't have time to be railing about other people's sins.
I think that's exactly right. And you speak to the log in the eye, coming from someone who has had some. I've done a pretty good job of sticking a couple of 2x4s in my eye, and there were some pretty heavy prices to pay for those things. There was a great deal of redemption that had to occur in my life in order for me to even get to a place where I felt worthy to even be a pastor any longer. I think what those seasons of life of bad decisions on my part, I think what that did for me was put me in a place of of understanding people who have just made a mess of their life, and maybe they've been in and out of prison. They've been divorced several times. They've had prodigal children. They've had financial difficulties. They've had health difficulties, all in part due to just poor decision making. And so I try to be very sympathetic and empathetic toward people who just find themselves in a really bad, dark, stormy spot, maybe because of their own doing, because I'd been in that same dark, stormy spot. And so I've in my theological upbringing, and ours are fairly similar, didn't hear a lot about grace, didn't hear a whole lot about forgiveness and compassion and love, heard a lot of hellfire and sin and what, not the things that we were doing right, but the things we were doing wrong, all of that. And so I think on the grace scale, I have found myself over the last decade. I began listening about 12 years ago with this Scottish guy. Somebody shared him with me, and it's your fault, so you're welcome to the journey that I'm on. But began hearing a lot about grace and mercy and God and love, God's love, and I like that. So let's move away from the heavy works end of the spectrum to, let's do the best we can. It's not Jesus plus anything, and grace is going to cover. Grace is going to cover. You're going to fall down, skin your knees, mess up, need healing, all that. And I think that's what Hope Church has become. We truly are. I'd like to think that we're a hospital for our community. Had a lady send me a message just yesterday. And she had expressed the desire to be baptized, but she had this caveat. But I want to get it right before I do, and I haven't even responded to that yet. But my response is going to be, I don't know what that is or what that means, but I'm not there. I don't know if you'll get there, so let's just go and do that. It's on your heart to do it, and we're all a work in progress here.
Right.
And a lot of that work in progress is learning to say no to the things that have gotten us in trouble.
Well, if we could get it right, we wouldn't need baptism or Jesus. That's the whole thing. We're all sinners, and a lot of our Safe Harbor people are in small house churches, and others are sitting by themselves on the couch.
Yeah.
They have been judged and been found wanting by churches or by their families or by an ex-husband or an ex-wife. They have been isolated Some of them just geographically, but a lot of them have been isolated by the decisions they've made or the decisions others made that impacted them. Sure. You know, one of the things that I think Hope Church does with your recovery programs is that we're not just a hospital, you're also a therapeutic center in that, and the difference is, in a therapeutic center, they are being taught how to not be sick. Right. And that's a big part. I think that's a big failing in American medicine. You know, you come in and we'll give you medicine, but instead of sitting down with you and saying, you've got to stop eating this and you need to eat this. Right. You have got to do this. You've got to change that. And in therapy, they're learning how to do that and it doesn't even look like you've got to stop. It's more the group is sharing, this is what got me from having to run back Amen. To the hospital Amen. And run back to it.
Our mutual friend, Rubel Shelley, I've heard him say this many different times. I don't know if he's the one that came up with it, but it made all the sense in the world to me several years ago, and it really does now. And I believe he said that in his opinion, the perfect model for the church is an AA program. Yeah. In that, you know, we all have our whatever. My name is Devin, and I am a whatever. Mm-hmm. And taking some self-inventory, being very honest with what you see in the mirror, and being willing to say, this is my struggle, and this is what I need assistance with. I think what has happened, one of the things at Hope Church is, one of the things that we do oftentimes is I will just simply, as is happening today, we'll have someone that wants to share their testimony, and so we'll get up and just kind of do an interview thing like this. Did one about a month ago with a lady who had been in several domestic abusive relationships until she finally figured that out. And she has a loving husband now. He's supportive of her. It's a beautiful thing. In a couple of weeks, so we have what we call Recovery Sunday at Hope. Usually is on the fifth Sunday, if a month has a fifth Sunday, so 4 or 5 of them a year. Well, at the end of August, we're hopefully going to interview a local judge who I actually had a discussion with this morning. A local judge who has very openly come out and said that he has struggled with alcohol for 40 years. For 40 years, he has struggled with this disease. And he told me this morning that for the longest time, he thought, well, I just need to quit drinking. If I quit drinking. And he finally figured out, or therapy helped him to figure out, that it wasn't the drinking. It was, what's going on in here? What type of trauma or dysfunction occurred, maybe when he was younger, that now has domino affected into him becoming this alcoholic. But he's gotten help through some really good therapy, some really good counseling. He was baptized about a month ago, and he just can't wait to tell this story. He's not ashamed of it. He wants to be transparent about it and clear that here's a judge, you know, somebody that you would respect and rightly so, but that he had issues. I mean, here's a guy that every day sits in a black robe and tells people, he sentences them probably most of the time because they couldn't tell themselves no. Right. They couldn't say no to speeding, or they couldn't say no to drugs, or they couldn't say no to whatever, while all the while in the background, he couldn't even tell himself no. Right. And he says he's turned his life over to the Lord, and he believes that telling his story is therapeutic. That's going to help him, but it's also going to help others who may be struggling with the same thing and open up a relationship with him, that they can come to this judge and say, hey, I'm the same. Help me out. So I think being able to be transparent about not saying no, that's powerful, and I'm thankful he's willing to do that.
It is, and there are words in the Bible like drunkenness that mean a lot more than being drunk. It means to be overfilled. And so it's the same words that we use for gluttony. There's nothing wrong with a little wine. Use a little wine for your stomach's sake, as Paul told Timothy. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's a lot wrong with drunkenness. There's nothing wrong with eating. There's a lot wrong with gluttony. But those are the two ones we think about. But there's also, you can overfill on your phone and technology, social media, which really is becoming an epidemic disease among our people. According to some teachers I've talked to, and this is not scientific survey, But all three of them from different states, when I asked them what their middle schoolers wanted to grow up to be, said about 75% want to become influencers.
Yeah.
Well, there's not a market that'll support or sustain this, but it's become that so overwhelming to get the clicks, to get the likes, that even on YouTube, the face has to look like you're in shock. And here are 10 reasons, and number 8 will scare you to death. You know, that sort of thing.
Right.
And we can overfill with that. We can overfill with politics. We can and I hate to say this.
But you're going to anyway.
I'm going to. You can overfill with church. You can become hyper-religious to a point where it's a disease.
Absolutely.
It is not helping you anymore. But how do we learn to say no? I think some therapeutic, some of the sharing, learning how others did. We did a series here on Christian disciplines, and one of the things I talked about was fasting teaches you how to say no. Because here's something you're allowed to have. In fact, you're designed to have it. And you're able to look at it and go, no. And we talked a lot about not an absolute fast, but rather eliminate this or eliminate that for a particular time. Something which you have a compulsion to have. It could be meat. It could be sugar. It could be whatever it is. It could be social media. You have times that the phone's turned off, which is terrifying. You know, learning how to say no can start with fasting if you give that time over to prayer, or even better, according to Isaiah, give that time over to serving other people, treating your employees better, as Isaiah would say, paying good wages, sharing your goods, and let that be a true fast unto the Lord. I think giving, generosity, is a way of saying no. Because open my wallet, a couple 20s in there, I've got a lot of things I can do with a couple of 20s. But to say no to me and yes to somebody else, these little steps can help us learn to say no. I mean, do you have anything in mind? We haven't talked about this, but do you have anything in mind to help people learn these baby steps to saying no?
I don't know that I do, but the churches that I grew up in, celebrating or practicing Lent leading up to Easter wasn't a thing. We just would never, I didn't know what it Lent was something that was in your pocket. But once we planted Hope Church, and there are a number of different streams of theological backgrounds that are at Hope Church. We are a buffet. We've got Catholics, Pentecostals, Methodists, Baptist, Church of Christ, nuns, all these different flavors. And so it's beautiful. It's beautiful. So some of those folks did practice Lent. And so several years ago, I began trying to do the same. And I quickly found out that saying no to sugar for me was really, really tough. But it was far more beneficial than what I realized. When I got to about my mid-40s, my blood pressure started creeping up just a little bit. Not a lot, and I was placed on the lowest dosage of that. And I attributed that, so I own a barbecue restaurant, so there's a lot of salted meats, you know, and so I eat a lot of red meat, that kind of thing. I thought, well, my diet's not helping any. So I thought it was salt, those kind of things. Well, what I found out for me was that when I went this period of several days, 40 days-ish, without eating sugar, and it was hard because I love sweet tea. I mean, I don't know if Scottish folks drink that, but we do.
It's an abomination, but go ahead.
The best place for unsweet tea is to be poured down the sink. But for me, it was sweet tea, candy, those kind of things. But once I had done that, and I'd got a life insurance checkup around that time, and she did my blood pressure and all these different diagnostic things, and they were perfect. And I said, I hadn't changed anything other than stopping the sugar. And she said, sugar affects that a lot, your blood pressure, all these things. And so I think if we could have a Lenten mentality of, giving this up, or at least in moderation even, it can be very, very beneficial. A lot of these folks, we were at the one-year recovery church celebration last night, and 2 or 3 people got up and shared their testimony. And one of the fellas got up, and he had like 4 years clean at one time, and then he fell off. And then he had another, a few years and fell off. And as of last night, he just was a few weeks sober. And he said, all I know to do is when I get knocked down, just to get up and start again. And I think that's really how grace is. God doesn't expect us to get it right. God knows that we're going to do a really terrible job of saying no to us. And we all have it. We all have it. But God also reassures us through His Word that just get yourself up, dust your seat off, and keep going. That's all you can do. I think there's a country song, if you're going through hell, keep on going, because you'll eventually get to the other side. And we have a lot of folks at Hope Church and in our community that they're literally going through hell. And we're just there to try to hold their hand, 23rd Psalm kind of thing. When you're walking through the valley of this, we just want to be there and assist you as best we can. And as you said, I think it is a continual process. No matter how old you are, it's always you're still at work. You're still working. And I don't know if there's one specific key that I think is to help folks to say no to themselves, but just what helps me is just knowing other people are struggling the same that I am.
There you go. There's a community aspect to this. I can remember I had a secretary when I was in West Virginia that had constant lung issues, and she was in and out of the hospital a lot. They couldn't find what was wrong. Came in one day, she was smiling. I said, "How you doing? Are you looking happy?" And she goes, "Yes, they finally told me what it was." And I said, "Great, what do you have?" And she said, "Idiopathic pulmonary disease." And I went, "Oh." I didn't tell her. Idiopathic means we don't know. We have no idea what it is. There's something wrong. But just feeling like it has a name. And there is a group of us out there that have this together. That made her feel not so isolated. And I think one of our problems here is we have not been faithful to each other. So we can't share when we have failed to say no. We can't. You and I are both ministers. We're both pastors over a church. And by the way, our safe harbor, we've said since day one, if you believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, you're a member here.
Yes.
And if you don't believe that, you're a member here.
Yes.
And that has thrown some folk who think we should be a little bit stricter than God, but we refuse to join in. But one of the problems with being a minister is, who do you talk to? Because a lot of people have another flaw, and their flaw might not be our flaw, but it might be gossip, and then you're in trouble, right?
Right.
And so a lot of ministers, judges, school teachers, politicians, doctors implode. A lot of folk don't realize the high suicide rate among dentists, the high addiction rate among doctors, the high suicide rate among judges. They don't see this. They hear about police officers, and they attribute that to stress. And police officers go through a lot, there's no question. But without a community to share in, we're in trouble. And one of the reasons we don't have one is because we've not taught our folk faithfulness, non-judgmentalism, not to share, but to bear, to have forbearance with other people. Yeah. And I don't have a solution for that other than to say we need to raise a generation that doesn't throw rocks, that just refuses to, and that doesn't look upon others as, well, their dirt's dirty, but mine isn't. But understands we are all co-travelers here. Just because I may not be tempted by what's tempting you. I've never been tempted by heroin, for example. Yeah. And I grew up in the 60s and 70s where that was the thing. Yeah. Never been tempted by it, but I've been tempted by a whole lot of other things that I've said yes to. So I understand spiritual failure. And I told you before we started about a test a psychologist came up with a long time ago. It's called the marshmallow test. A lot of you have seen it on social media because parents love to secretly record their kids on this. And they'll have their child, 2 years old, 3 years old, 4 years old, somewhere like that. And they will place a cookie or a marshmallow. Originally, it was a large marshmallow. And the parent will then tell them, I'm going to be away in the bathroom. Do not eat this marshmallow. If you do not eat this marshmallow, I will give you 2 marshmallows. And again, it could be a cookie, but we're sticking with this. Parent goes away. Now, the parent doesn't say, I'm going to be away for 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Generally speaking, it's an untold amount of time, which that open-ended is a killer. And you see the kids writhing in agony, and they'll reach over and touch it, and then they'll look away. And a lot of them just can't help it. They will grab it and eat it. And then they'll come up with all kinds of explanations when the mama who's watching on her phone will come out and see. Whether or not you like the test and whether or not you like the social medias, this has been done for a very long time. So there are longitudinal studies, in other words, studies done following these kids for 40 years. And they found that the kids that didn't eat the marshmallow, that waited, that said no for now, which is all they were saying. They weren't saying no forever, but no for now, grew up and got better educations, better degrees, were thinner, had fewer addictions. This sounds wonderful. My first thought is probably your first thought, and that is, are we then condemning the kids that ate the marshmallow to a life with no self-control? And the good news is that the psychologist that came up with the test said, no, this can be taught. You can teach the child that doesn't have natural self-control how to have it. I fear we aren't teaching our kids this because we ourselves are too addicted to our social media, our phones, our food, and therefore the kids are modeling. We have an instant. And so you see kids screaming for things in the store. Somehow we've got to teach people, we can say no for now, but mainly we have to teach ourselves so that they can see it can be done.
I think that's right. I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and Joe Rogan is one of those, and he's not for everybody, but he's for some people, and I like to listen to him. And he talks a great deal about discipline. And I think, he's the #1 podcast in the world, and he talks a great deal about health, about taking care of himself, about cold plunges, about sauna, about all these things that he does on a regular basis, taekwondo, and keeps himself in good shape. And I think that through folks like him and other people, I think that discipline is sort of making a comeback in that, hey, if you take care of yourself, you not guaranteed, but you might live longer, you might have a better quality of life and all these things. And I think you're exactly right. My granddaughter was given her first cell phone over this past Christmas. And she's, she's 10 or 11 years old. But up until recently, and even now, she'd just as soon be outside or doing some kind of art thing than messing around on her phone. And I told her mom, my daughter said, look, you need to milk this as long as you can. Because it is an absolute epidemic. I would think that, to me, that the cell phone, social media is as addictive as anything that's out there.
It is.
I mean, even myself, my phone is over there, and I've got a little bit of jitter going because is it going off? What's the messages that I'm missing? Whatever, and that's not good. It's not healthy. But I think discipline obviously falls into the self-control arena. I mean, that's what you can't have one without the other. And to your point, the Bible doesn't say to not drink wine. It says don't get drunk.
Right.
I have no moral theological issue with someone having a glass of wine with dinner. But now, to have 10, it becomes a problem. Fact of the matter is at Hope Church, we use the Old Standard Welch's grape juice, right? But there again, I would have no theological issue with us having real wine in those cups. The problem for us in our particular congregation demographic is we have a lot of folks in recovery, a lot of folks that are working on sobriety, and just the top of this water bottle full of alcohol, even just a communion cup size, could throw somebody back off.
Yeah.
And so it's not a theological issue for us. It's a matter of respect and understanding that there's a lot of battles being waged among the folks in our church, and just saying no to that in one little bit could really mess up their life.
Yeah, with alcohol, if you're an alcoholic, 1 drink is too many, 10 is not enough. And so, yes, and once again, the community comes to the rescue.
Yes.
By saying, we will adjust to help pull you along with us. Without judging, we're going to pull you along. I love Devin, and I love what he's done with Hope Church, and I love Hope Church. You can find them online at YouTube at Hope Church Hickman. Hickman is Hickman. You can also follow Devin on Facebook. Don't do the friend request thing. Just stalk him, follow him, because he does put up some really interesting short videos, teaching videos and lessons. But he also puts up pictures and such of the baptisms. And I don't know any church that per person is baptizing like you are. Did I see correctly on one of your posts, you even have a sign if you're interested in baptism?
Yeah. I don't know if the city administration, they know it's up there, but we had a sign, like a license plate sign kind of, and so there's a light pole right there by the boat ramp going into the river, and it says, Hope Church baptizes here. If you'd like to be baptized or more information, call, and I think it's my cell number. So we've become known as we have folks who don't even come to Hope Church who will reach out to me and just say, hey, I would like to be baptized, and I never turn anybody away, ever. That's between them and God. And so it's quite an honor to do that, and God is doing some amazing things. We're just happy to be along for the ride.
And as we've said to you, if you want to be baptized, you let us know. You write in, info@oursafeharbor.com, and one of us will get to you. We've not failed to get to people yet, and we would get to you. But Devin, it's been a pleasure, and thank you.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you and your work. And maybe you'll help me be a little bit more self-controlled.
We'll work on it.
All right.
All right.
God bless you.
Thank you so much for having me.
God
Appreciate
bless you.
it. Yeah.